Guild Wars 2 is a now free-to-play MMO that was released to a relatively great amount of hype in 2012. It promised to treat the standard MMO formula, bringing much needed improvements to a genre that had grown both stale and repetitive due to the success of World of Warcraft. With a focus on quality of life and a simplified but fast-paced combat system, ArenaNet set their sights on being the next big thing. The game released, and after a few months I think the general consensus was that the game didn't live up to the sky-high expectations set by both the company and the fanbase. The game reviewed relatively well, but as countless examples will tell you, this doesn't matter much for an MMORPG. Many of the promised features and core aspects of the game turn out to be less than ideal. The supposedly living world turned out to be mostly an overstatement, as no in-game events had the world-changing impact that was promised. The main story missions turned out to be nothing more than a boring, unfocused mess that you would continually have to talk yourself into playing. Perhaps most crucially, the game was lacking any real, hard end-game content except for a single dungeon, which made most hardcore MMO players leave relatively soon after they had reached level cap. As a result of this, Guild Wars 2 was labeled as a very casual MMO, which you can imagine isn't healthy for growing a hardcore audience. It didn't matter that the general PvE experience was pretty entertaining or that the world vs world game mode allowed PvP on a large scale with both siege warfare and an emphasis on resource management. It also didn't matter that the game was leagues in front of all its competition in pretty much every other way. The game was just deemed dead in many people's eyes, and bad reputations tends to be a nail in the coffin for most games, especially MMORPGs. This is where the story of Guild Wars 2 ended for many people, and also the point why I stopped playing all those years ago. Many people, myself included, discarded the game and moved to supposedly greener pastures. So why am I talking about this semi-old MMO now, you ask? Well, 3 years ago I picked up Guild Wars 2 again, and discovered a game that had changed drastically since its launch. New open world PvE maps and new endgame content in the form of special dungeons had been added. Many systems had also been streamlined and made actually good. After I picked back up the game, I played for weeks non-stop. I joined a community, met new people, made friends, and had amazing experiences in both world v world PvE and to some extent PvP. The game was not perfect, it still had many flaws, and the community was in general pretty cynical when it came to the game's future prospects of improvement. At the time, I probably wouldn't have made this video. I didn't feel confident in recommending the game to anyone, since it didn't really seem like the developers knew what they were doing. It was not until the first expansion, Heart of Thorn, was released in 2015 that I finally started to feel confident in recommending the game to friends and acquaintances. The game I loved had finally enough content to be what I always wanted it to be, a good, meaty MMO to keep any player occupied for hours and hours on end. Raids, several maps with epic world events, a new profession, even further character customization and progression, and the ability to freaking glide were among the few things added in this expansion. The story was also expanded greatly and much improved from the previous 3 years of content. The expansion story was not without its own set of problems, but it managed to do something that the 2012 story didn't. It made me actually care for characters and story arcs in an MMO, something you rarely see me doing even in games like Star Wars: The Old Republic. Perhaps the greatest thing about Heart of Thorns was that it did not invalidate the content that had come before. The devs chose to elevate the skill ceiling instead of just raising the level cap. And due to the mastery and elite specialization systems, character progression was possible without having to ditch your entire loadout each time an expansion came out. With new exciting environments to explore, new stories to experience, and new bosses and world events to complete, Guild Wars 2 was in my eyes truly made great again. Following the expansion, the developers showed an amazing ability to regularly add both new open world maps with fresh content and new interesting additions to the personal story. It seems that the devs have finally figured out an internal structure of development which allows them to develop regular content updates along with patches, and while at the same time also working on the next expansion. I have personally never been happier with the development of any online game before, which is why I feel totally confident in recommending Guild Wars 2 to anyone that is even remotely interested in MMOs. The main game is, as I said, free to play now, so you really stand to lose nothing from giving the game a shot. Take time to enjoy the leveling, the exploration, the cross-server large-scale PvP, and feel confident in the fact that plenty of content is awaiting you if you ever reach endgame, especially with the new expansion releasing right around the corner. The game is not without its flaws, and there's definitely still places that need improvement, I would never deny that. But I still see Guild Wars 2 as being miles in front of its competition, and if you are looking for a new MMO to play anyway, why not give Guild Wars 2 a shot? It is very rare that I really fall in love with a game, especially after they had already let me down once. If you take a look around my channel, you'll find several videos of me heavily criticizing games for even the slightest of problems. From that you can see that I rarely forgive a game's flaws, and it takes one hell of a good game to change that. Guild Wars 2 in its current state is just that type of game. A game that is so good, so unique, so entertaining that I can just enjoy myself despite its problems. And if that is not one hell of a recommendation, I don't know what it is. If you do decide to jump into the game, you can find me on the Aurora Glade server. I hope to see you in game, and I hope you come to enjoy it just as much as I do.